What I want to talk about today is Asperger's and crushes. Um, and by crush, what I mean is um, this is kind of like an attraction that has taken on a certain amount of autonomy, or it feels autonomous, and it's become maybe a bit of an obsession. I would say a crush is not quite a full-fledged obsession, but an obsession could be that you're still pursuing somebody, but with like a negative kind of approach. Maybe you've taken on a certain amount of hate for them, and I don't think in a crush you can really make a lot of room for hating that person or being too angry with them. So I'm going to say that a crush kind of stops short of being a full-fledged obsession. So what is the reason for a crush? Why do we get a crush? And I just have a few thoughts on this, from my own experience. I think people may get a crush because something is lacking in their life and they are looking to add a certain amount of um, depth or excitement that they don't feel that they currently have. And so let's say first off we have a person going around leading their normal life, and then I don't know, somebody catches their eye for some reason. Let's say it's your professor. Okay, and your professor is just so smart and gives such wonderful lectures, and you just think that he's really the cat's meow. Now, this has happened to me numerous times. Um, why would I get a crush on a professor? I mean, the professor may be like 5'2" and 400 pounds, and I've got a crush. Well, now, what is that about? Well, it's because he's just so darn smart, and he's so clever and he's so funny, and he's just a very, very good professor, and I'm learning a hell of a lot from him. Okay, so I'm sitting there in the front row, and I'm just all around very, very happy when this person is around. Okay, so I might develop a crush. Now, what does that really mean? It actually means that I want to learn that subject very well. Is that I want to be absorbing the material in a way that is more in a kind of like a hyperdrive. And now I get to that hyperdrive maybe by having this crush, because maybe there's more dopamine flooding into my sensory system or something, and I'm just remembering more, and I'm more motivated. I'm all over more motivated to do a great job in the class. Now that's a pretty benign reason for a crush. In fact, that's a pretty darn good reason to have a crush. Um, now, the problem with that is then you start thinking other things. Other little parts of your mind will plug into it that somehow, in some way, you have to obtain this person. And you need to know if they feel the same thing for you that you feel for them. Well, I can tell you from experience, the answer to that is pretty much uniformly no. They do not. And if they do, whatever they're experiencing is on a completely different plane than you are on. I mean, you are on, okay, or me, I should say. I'm on my little aspie plane of seeing things my way, being very um, single-minded, watching, um, interpreting, making all kinds of assumptions based on my own mode of thinking, which is very specific. Um, it can be obsessional, uh, just a very, very specific type of life and thinking. And this person is in a completely different world than I am. Okay, it took me many, many years to understand that people are just not in the same world. They're walking around in the world, but they are not seeing life the same way at all. And this, I think, is something that's hard for an aspie person to understand, because it seems so obvious. It seems obvious, like, wow, they're fantastic. And then you think, well, they must be thinking that I'm fantastic too. And they're not. Maybe they're very nice, maybe they're very kind, maybe they're very gracious, but really, unless you're like a supermodel or something, they are not in the same place that you are about this. And this can be a very hard lesson to learn, and it's hard to face, but eventually, I believe there are things that you can get out of coming to this realization that, in a sense, it will free you up so that you do not have to be bound by the constraints of some crush that may have been getting you down, or a crush that might have been verging on an obsession. You can just relax and stop it. Okay, maybe it doesn't stop completely, but there's a room for the rational thought here. This isn't just like sour grapes or some kind of Freudian defense mechanism or something. This is just being reasonable about what's going on. Yes, you have an attraction, you've developed a crush. Okay. Now, you have to ask yourself, do you really want that to go any farther? And you may find out that the reality of it going farther is really quite unappealing if you analyze it. If you see that suddenly this 400-pound professor that you have, who is so smart and wonderful in class, you picture, well, like, what's it going to be like when I'm actually like his girlfriend? Okay, well, after some point in time, you're going to find out that there's all kinds of negative things about this fellow. I mean, he's great in class, and you love him for that, but it's just not, it doesn't make sense. Okay, and eventually you may find yourself crying crocodile tears because you realize you have to get rid of this guy. So the main basic point of this analysis of crushes can be applied to many, many things. And the basis for all of it is reality. Okay, how can we see more reality? Okay, and since I'm an aspie, I see my reality in a single-minded kind of way. When I was little and I had crushes, there was only one crush because there's only one thing and it had to be that specific thing, and there were just no alternatives. That is, until I changed my mind or until it wore off or whatever. But I mean, I didn't get a crush and then sort of morph around into, well, let me see, maybe I have these other possibilities of what I could do. I just didn't see other possibilities. And this can be a big problem in life when you don't see these other possibilities because, like I say, if you have Asperger's, you just may not see the full range of possibilities. You see what you want now, and either you're going to get that or you're going to have nothing, because that's just, for some reason how your mind has been designed. You're perhaps born that way, right? I think we are born to be absent. So what are some of the advantages of reality? Well, reality lets you be a lot more free. It lets you suspend what's in your mind because your mind may be tricking you. Really, it might. Like in the case of having possibilities that you don't realize that you have, your mind may be saying, no, there's only yes or no, there's only this or nothing. I want one thing. Okay, so if you look around, is that really realistic? Is there really only one person that's going to satisfy? And then also think about the effect it has on other people. Okay, now that has been hard for me to really understand until later in my life. The kind of effect that I have on other people by being so single-minded. It's not, this is the basic thing, it's not fair to the other person to put a crush on them. If you have a crush, you have to own that crush, okay? Because it is just not fair to other people to be interfering in their life in such a way that it feels like you have an agenda. Okay, now, as an aspie, I don't like it when other people have agendas about me. So why should I force my agenda on them? Okay, that doesn't it does not compute. Okay, so I can get a big reward out of noticing when I have these kinds of situations, like say I develop some crush. Now, this is an opportunity for me to just act really reasonable. Um, okay, I notice that I've got this pattern of behavior or pattern of thinking, and what can I do to try to match up the best I can with reality? And if I do those behaviors, like just being pleasant and just treating everybody kind of the same, uh, yeah, it makes everything go a lot more smoothly. And I'm not forcing that person into any kind of box. I'm not putting my, projection out onto them, if you want to get into depth psychology there, you just withdraw your projection. And once you've done that, you're more free. You can walk around and it's not hampering you. It's not interfering. And the more you can be happy with yourself, just being you, and not having to experience this um, pressure. So I guess the main thing that I want to say is don't beat your don't beat yourself up if you have a crush. But at the same time, let yourself off the hook, but also let that other person off the hook. That's really important because people don't like to have a pressure on them from an outside source. There's enough pressure in everyday life, day to day. So instead of pursuing a crush and worrying a lot about what's going on in that other person's mind or not going on in their mind, or do they like me, do they not like me, um, you know, picking petals off daisies or whatever. Okay, instead of doing that, try just being really smooth and don't ask them leading questions. Just ask, try to use, if you have counseling skills, for example, like if you've somehow learned um, listening skills, just ask them, so how are things going? Don't try to squeeze out some detail about some jealous thing that, maybe they went out with somebody and now you've heard about it and now you're going to get really jealous and irritated. No, they don't deserve it. They don't deserve that. Just ask them a nice open-ended question that they feel comfortable answering and then let them be on their way. It just makes sense. So when you've done that, you can feel good about yourself because you know that you let somebody talk and that you didn't force anything on them and that you are all set, basically. Because there's a lot more in the world out there than sometimes we Aspies like to admit. There are a lot more options, um, a lot more alternatives. And if you really get down to it, that crush may have turned into a terrible relationship anyway. Okay, that sounds like sour grapes, but it's actually pretty true. So let the crush leave. Just let it go. And I guess that's my advice on crushes and Asperger's. Thank you.